Hello and welcome to another edition of Ephlux Insights. My name is Babar Khan. I'm the entrepreneur resident for this program. Today we're honored to be joined by John Griffiths, the founder and CEO of Planning and Above Beyond Limited in the UK. John has been in the consulting world with Planning Above and Beyond, and he runs brand development workshops and communication planning projects. And the electric learning and immersive learning company, he runs training courses for marketing, advertising, and research people. In the 90s, he was one of the first communication strategists to expand the role from advertising through every aspect of communication with companies such as Ogilvy One, Gray's Integrated, Carlson Group, and CDP. Thank you for being on the program, John. Really appreciate the time that you've taken out. Could you just briefly, or as long as it's entirely up to you, go over a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and your career thus far?
Okay. Well, thanks for the invitation, Barbara. It's good to be with you. And just to explain my background, it's always, I'm interested in people's DNA. You know, where do they come from? Where do they get their business experience? My background has been almost entirely, before I started running my own consultancy, has been with agencies, ad agencies. So the fact that my consultancy is called Planning Above and Beyond, which I thought was kind of a cute, clever name at the time when I started it, because I am an account planner. That's my background. I've worked with advertising agencies before I worked with different other kinds of agencies all the way through. And the great thing about being an account planner is that it gives you a huge experience of very, very diverse businesses. You just don't know when you go to work in the morning what kind of client is going to walk through the door, and you have to at least have something to engage them right from the first minute of the conversation. So it's a great training ground. But because of the experience that I have as a planner, it's natural that I then move into research, because for me to do my planning job, which has to be customer driven, I have to be good at buying research, even more powerful if I can do research myself, and so one becomes an expert in getting customer insights. A third level of what I do is facilitation, because if you're good with customers and good with people, actually the other part of the piece is working with client organizations. You and I were just having a conversation just a few minutes ago about the challenges of culture and implementation. There is no point in having insights inside a client organization if no one can make changes from inside that organization and take it anywhere. That's the responsibility of the customer insight people inside the client organization. But I believe that I can help people in that kind of role. And my final hat, if I can say, I've given you 3 hats already. Hat number 4 is the training hat. In other words, I teach people how to do the same things.
All right, that's quite unique. Someone knows something and they are willing to share it, but I guess in your part of the world that's quite common, not so much in developing countries. So that's a bit about your background. If you don't mind, could you sort of tell me about sort of like your first job and how you progressed as you went up in terms of the sort
Yeah,
of
okay.
functions and the sort of core responsibilities that you had, and now that you're on this side?
Okay. I will, yeah. Okay, I'll give you my sort of. Um, the first job that I had was in an advertising agency which no longer exists, but I had 2 big pieces of business. One was milk, how to sell milk using milkmen. And, and the whole challenge about this is that with client politics, the main growth area was buying milk in, shock horror, shops. And because they only wanted to talk about buying milk from, in Britain, until quite recently, we still have them sometimes. We have people that drive milk around in electric vehicles and they deliver it to your house. But because their whole way of life was you should buy milk from a guy that comes to your house once a day, they wouldn't even allow you to admit in a meeting that you could go into a store and buy milk. We had to kind of pretend that it wasn't happening. So that was a very early introduction into kind of, denial and blindness, as in, look, guys, we all go and buy milk from shops. Let's not kid ourselves. But we couldn't. In meetings, we couldn't admit it. My other big client was Guinness. And that was demonstrating the effectiveness of massive, massive advertising campaigns where you're spending millions, and when millions really meant something then. So that was really my beginning, and I was an advertising researcher who had to demonstrate the effect of spending money on mass advertising. And I worked for a couple of agencies, different projects. But the big change for me came when I'll give a date which makes you realize how old I am, which was in 1990. I'd been working in my spare time. I'd been running a band with my brothers, and because I was in a band, I suddenly became a client for the first time, and I discovered that I loved PR because it didn't cost me anything and it got me all this publicity. And I loved direct marketing because every time I spent money, I got money back. So I loved direct marketing. And I hated advertising because every time I spent it, I never knew exactly what happened to it. And I always felt like I didn't know where the value was. And so therefore, I got offered a job in a direct marketing agency. And I thought, I probably shouldn't do this. It's career suicide, but I think I should do it. So I went and joined a direct marketing agency. It was the smartest thing I ever did because I got into direct marketing just at the point where strategy people and brand people were starting to join direct marketing agencies. It wasn't just about direct response. And so therefore, I found myself in a situation where all the stuff I had learned firsthand as my own client, running a band and making money. I can tell you about mail shots I did, which paid back the costs of recording and stuff like that, because I'd learned direct marketing as a business person. And anyway, having discovered direct marketing, and my old friends in advertising just said, "You'll never work again. You'll never work in advertising. It's impossible. Can't be done." Whatever. Through the 1990s, I worked as a planner and a planning director in sponsorship agencies, sales promotion, PR, very early digital, CRM, and so on, right across the piece. It was like this big playground that I went and played in. And I wound up at the end of the 90s working in an agency called CDP on Honda's advertising, where all of the account was in one agency. And I got to do everything from TV commercials right to briefing the telephone people. It was my train set, and I got to play with it. And I was so proud of being able to do all of that. And having done that, I didn't really know what other jobs you could do because it was the best job in the world to me. And so I started up my own company and thought, well, I find that when I make recommendations to people, people find me an enthusiast, but sometimes they go, that idea is crazy. But in an agency, even though agencies have a reputation for being innovative, I would find that 90% of my ideas would be turned down. And they'd say, you can't even tell a client that because that's crazy. Whereas working for myself, all of my ideas I get to say, and probably more than 50% of them get through. So I think that's a plus. So since 2000, I've been running my own consultancy, doing a whole blend of basically taking the idea of communications planning, broadening it from advertising because my experience is so much wider than that, but therefore because of the other parts of the job I've mentioned to you, I know more about how to do research, and so in that sense I do a lot of research, and I'm an expert in doing different kinds of research to engage with customers. I'm also much more experienced in working with clients, and they work with me in terms of business development workshops and all of that. And I'm doing a whole lot more training, and I mentioned to you at various places I've trained, and I guess one of the most prestigious was being a visiting professor for 4 years for the IE Business School, training in distance learning, the digital MBA.
Yeah, I was actually going to get to that. How did that even come about? So you went from solid decade and a half of being in the planning and being in the hands-on industry, then you decided to teach. What life event was it that inspired you that at one point you decided, I mean, in our part of the world, for example, if you ask someone their motivations, they'll give you the happier reason, but you go deep down, and then they just say, I was sick of hiring people who didn't know these basic things. So I thought I'll be part of the change instead of just complaining about it. So just like in your case, what was that trigger that caused that? So maybe even helps NGO organizations watching this in recruiting teachers from the field to the classroom.
Um, That's so deep a question. I have to go and think about it. I don't know why or how it started. I do know that when I set up my consultancy, because I had a passion, sometimes one of the reasons why you set something up or it helps you as you develop something is you're against something. You pick a bad guy. You know what I'm saying? That's what gets everyone to work. You get everyone fired up. We're against this. We're going to change this. A lot of businesses have built themselves because they pick a bad guy.
Hmm.
Um, for me, the frustration, and I should also say, by the way, if you do pick a bad guy, it's normally best practice never to badmouth the bad guy. It's very easy to say we hate them, whatever. It's great inside, whatever, but it gets out eventually. And if you might have to work with a bad guy eventually, so you need to be careful about that. So I would argue if you're bringing about culture change, even if you're trying to change something, never criticize that organization or idea overtly. Basically challenge it with something alongside which is different and better. But anyway, the point is that I'll tell you what my bad guy was, and I have to be careful here, but the bad guy was people who did my job, who worked in ad agencies, who thought the only way of doing business was the answer to every question is advertising. And it was ridiculous. And having worked for a decade in all sorts of different agencies, I would be able to say, you know what, advertising is the wrong thing to do here. Direct marketing is the wrong thing to do here. This is the right thing to do here, and so on. I had permission to say it. But when I talked about this, people would say, well, you can't say that because you're working for a company whose job is just to sell as much advertising as possible. And let me tell you the problem with advertising. You make new content and you don't get paid unless you make new content. So you use your content maybe once, then you throw it away. You can't use it for anything else, and then you go and make some more. And so, of course, in an environment where we have content strategies, the agency struggles because they want to charge more than anyone else for making content. They only want to use it once, and then they want to make you some more. So in that context, you are compromised. So I guess my bad guy was to say, if you know advertising planning, you are an expert in the areas that I've talked about, but you know a third of all what you need to know. You actually need to understand audiences much better in the way in which communications engages with them, and you need to understand clients better and the way in which client organizations have to implement. And so therefore, I set up not only my consultancy, I set up a website where at the time I posted once a month. That was a long time ago. I'd post once a month, and I did this consecutively for 5 years. So I did 60 consecutive postings. And the end result of that was that I had just this massive information. People said, how do you have time to do this? Well, by just spending 1 day a month for 5 years. That's what I did. And that's how it grew. And because of that, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a very long answer.
It's all good.
You can edit it.
Yeah, it's all good.
People started to write to me and ask me for my advice. And I started getting letters from students saying, my business professors in the schools, they aren't helping me, I don't know what to do, and so on and so forth. So I'd write them an email, and these guys couldn't believe that I would help them. And then when they got jobs, they'd call me and get me to come and train in their agencies. And so therefore, I found myself training in Eastern Europe. I've done a lot of work in Romania. I've trained in Croatia, in Saudi Arabia. That was interesting. So you know, I have worked in a lot of different places. And I think because of it is about working with people, and it's exciting bringing people on. And you know, training isn't the most profitable business in the sense that if you train, you have to be doing it all the time. I do this almost, it's not a hobby, but it's something that I love doing because you get so much direct involvement from people, and I discover that the people I train go off and do amazing jobs in other parts of the world, and that makes me very proud as a trainer.
Yeah, definitely. Immediately making an impact on people and possibly changing the way they think. And they come from a very conventional wisdom where, like exactly what you said, this happens to. I mean, you've been to Saudi Arabia, so you've probably even experienced this with the professionals there. This happens everywhere in the world where the professional knows what is best for the customer, but at the end they have a boss they have to answer to. But now hopefully the world is changing to the point where even entrepreneurs are admitting that it's not the cake walk in the park that people think entrepreneurship is. At the end of the day, we all are answerable to the customer, and the customer will come back next time and say, I'm either not going to do business with you or I will. So you want to think about having the same meeting next year and talking about, okay, what else can we do, as opposed to that didn't work out, so let's try something else. And advertising doesn't work for everyone. It varies with your industry, with your market, with your psychographic, demographic, whatnot. That's absolutely right, valid on that. That's your background. I'd like to get some examples of the sort of work that you've done. You've given a bit of examples in terms of your work with when you were an employee,
Sure.
but as an employer, could you tell me about the work that you're doing, especially on the research side, because I'm really interested in consumer insights.
Okay. Well, hopefully I'll just give you some examples because you know, I work on a lot of different projects, but the ones I tend to remember and talk about are the ones where I guess my response is unconventional, or I'm doing something a little bit out of the ordinary where someone goes, why would you do that? How would that work? And so on. Because we're going to go and talk on a little bit about this concept of the Barefoot Insighter. But the thing that I think we are moving away from now is industrial research. What I mean by that is the idea that research is simply produced by getting surveys from mass audiences, by simply saying, I need, if I'm doing a project which involves talking to business startups, I need 10 of them, 10 of them, 10 of them, and we treat it as if it's a laboratory, as if it's a pure, unadulterated environment. And basically, I don't find that helpful. Often my clients, it's not just that they don't have so many resources, they also need to get to the answer as fast as possible. Therefore, they need shortcuts. That doesn't mean you fake it. What it means is you need to think smart. So, one example that actually came from a long time ago, but I'm very proud of it, because the client, as is often the case, has no budget for research. And the basic problem I had with this organization was that they were sales driven. So they knew everything about what sold. And with me coming in as a consultant, I was working for an agency at the time, they said, well, one guy said, I killed a line of bread after 45 minutes because the sales weren't going anywhere. So he didn't know why people weren't buying his bread. He simply saw the numbers on his screen going down, so he said, kill it. I'm a big guy. I'm a tough guy. I can kill a line of bread after that. Okay. So I said, why don't we find out what people think about your product? And this product was wine. And he said, well, there's no budget for research. And so I used the security cameras inside the stores to film people buying wine. And I discovered that for a bottle of wine, which was costing, I'll work in American dollars, but a $5 bottle of wine, some people were taking 15 minutes to buy a bottle of wine, and they were spending 15 minutes. They couldn't find anything. They hated it. You could see from their body language it was all wrong. The point was that here was an asset, security cameras, that were being used to find people who were trying to steal stuff from stores, and I turned it into a customer insight tool, and the cost was zero. Okay, so that was the first thing. Second thing was, I got a hold of a product called the TGI Index, very useful survey that we have in the UK, a massive thing, and you can start to cross-weight questions. But one of the useful questions on the TGI Index, and this client didn't even know about it, was that it asks you about the volume of wine that you buy, how many bottles a month, from different retailers. So I was able to see his customers, what proportion of their wine that they bought from his store and what proportion of wine they bought from the other stores. And so I was able to say, if these people could actually buy wine and find it easy, then, and they only bought, at the moment they're only buying a third of their wine from your store. If they bought half the wine from your store, and I did the calculation, do you see how much money you'd made? And his response was unprintable, but he was kind of excited about that. And I said, that was the second thing. The third thing was to say, do you know why they can't buy from your stores? I said to the wine buyer, I said, what do you prefer doing? Do you like buying wine or drinking it? He said, that's stupid because wine buying is my job. I go to vineyards and buy it. I said, no. Buying wine in a store. He said, no, I'm the wine buyer. I never buy wine in a store. And I said, I know. That's why I asked you the question. And he said, that's a really interesting thing. So I never buy wine, but I'm responsible for designing the labels. So all the labels in the wine store were designed by him, but he never went into a store to buy wine. So he had no insight into the customer experience whatsoever. And of course, I'd asked him the question, not because I didn't know the answer. I knew the answer, but I needed to help him to see that he was blind to the customer experience.
Brilliant. That's brilliant.
So and once we put all this together, the net result was that they were able to cut through and increase the wine sales. Now, the first I made 2 recommendations. This is a classic Barefoot Insider thing, okay? 2 recommendations. The first thing, which they did, was to say, I want you to double the thickness of your plastic bags, because these stores were situated in the middle of the town. So people didn't buy wine. So that when they used these stores, they walked in and out of the stores carrying bags. If you are given a thin plastic bag, you don't carry wine in it because it might fall and break. Therefore, people weren't buying wine. In other words, the first law of marketing is physics. You have to make the bag thick enough so that people can buy it in the confidence they're not going to break the wine before they carry it home. That gives them a reason to buy it. That was the first recommendation. The second thing I stole from one of the department managers who said, I love it when we have a breakage. Why? Because the sales go up. I thought, that's genius. You know why? Because wine...
Sorry, what's a breakage? I'm unfamiliar with that.
Every time someone drops a bottle of wine on the floor and it breaks, the sales increase.
Why?
The reason why people drink wine, and we can't admit this within the legal codes and everything else, people drink wine to get drunk and get happy. That's why they do it, okay? But when you look at a bottle of wine, it doesn't say that to you, because it doesn't say this will make you get off your face and so on. In other words, it gives you culture, it gives you all of those messages, but you have to decode, this will make me happy when I drink it. And therefore, all of the brand messaging is based on very limited messages. as soon as you smell wine, it reminds you of the experience of drinking it and all of that. And so therefore smell is one of the things that triggers people to bring on the experience. So here was my recommendation to the store. I said, at 5 o'clock every day, I'm not asking you to break a bottle.
Brilliant.
I'm asking you to open a bottle of wine, to spill it all over the floor, and then to mop it up. I guarantee to you that your sales will increase. And they went, we can't do that because health and safety and hygiene means we're not allowed to do that in a store. I said, fine. If you'd like to pay me to come into your stores every day and to break a bottle, then that fulfills your hygiene requirements and that's fine. But I'm giving you advice. If you want to increase your sales, just pour wine all over your floor and then mop it up and you will take the sales increase. Now, what I'm trying to explain to you is,
wow,
the kinds that those insights I've just given you have come from desk research, from a survey, they've come from observation using security cameras, and they've come from questions to the wine buyer, and also from simply hanging around a store and talking to staff who work in the store every day. That, to mine, is what Barefoot Insighter is about. It's taking all the knowledge from these different places, knowing what it means, and applying it straight away.
That's brilliant, man. I mean, that's just next level thinking. You really gone way out of the box. The idea that, yeah, it does. You're absolutely right. It does actually apply. There are these giant, huge stores. I guess they're called IMTs, International Modern Trade. They'll have a bakery section. They'll have a seafood section. When people smell the food or see the food in an appealing manner, or as it's being created, it does have an effect on in terms of how they're going to buy it. And then this is the same concept of, I guess, you don't have a concept. I mean, I don't drink alcohol or consume it in any way, but there isn't a concept of if a person wants to smell it or they want to get an idea of the taste, they can't even taste test it.
Well, yes,
Isn't
yes,
a concept even like that?
Yes, there is, and of course this happens in stores. And just the same as if we were moving away from the, alcohol to if we're talking about bakery products, in the same way you can ask people to sample the product. So yes, it is no more nor less than saying you should create sampling opportunities because it increases the sales. All I was doing was to say here is something which is a disaster, namely a breakage, which is considered a problem, and so we clear it away. That is increasing the sales. But of course, the other truth I was confronting them with was because of their culture as an organization, because it was a disaster, they didn't have a way of using it. Now, there was actually a way of using it, and I'm sure someone watching this program will say, I represent a company that pumps smells through air conditioning systems so that we can put coffee through, we can put bread through, we can put wine through, and that will increase sales. I understand that, but I'm not suggesting, I'm not trying to sell consultancy to organizations that put smells through air conditioning system in stores. I'm simply saying through the simple things that happen in a store, you can find huge gains in how your business performs, but you need someone with their eyes open to say, that's interesting, and then to put their finger down and say, you should do that.
That is brilliant stuff. That's one example. Could you tell us a bit more about your other work, perhaps the one with Mayfair Salon?
Okay, well, I'll give you that one, and I'll give you the Microsoft one as well, because that's quite fun too. The Mayfair Salon was because I was working for a brand. She ran her salon in Mayfair, and I seem to remember that Julia Roberts was one of her customers. And we're talking at a level here, if you're getting coloring of hair, and you have to get it right, they would fly a colorist to Los Angeles or to the film set to get the film star's hair colored. Now, here's the issue. She's briefed me as a researcher to go and take a £10, a $12 bottle, okay, and to take a product which costs you $400 or $500 and to put this into a bottle and to sell hope to a woman to go and use this herself at home. And I'm thinking, how do I do that? Now, if you've ever looked at this market sector, you will discover my eyesight's not as good as it was, but even when my eyesight was better, the writing on these things is tiny. There's detailed instructions. You can't see anything. It's just tiny. And of course, what you're offering here, one of the other things here with hair coloring is they put a picture on the bottle to show you how amazing you will look when you've colored your hair. That is the wrong picture to put on, because what you don't need the picture is of the result. You need the picture of what your hair looks like now, because you're going to put something, a chemical, on your hair, and you want it to look good. So you need to know what color your hair is now to make the difference. So that was also a problem. So what I was interested in was, how do they actually, how does the best coloring happen? And I went to watch on a training night, I went to watch the senior colorists training the apprentices. I watched how they worked, and almost all of their work was with touch. They would actually hold the hands of the trainees, and they'd say, touch your hair like this, put the coloring on like this, work it in like this, and so on. It was all tactile. It wasn't a set of instructions and saying, read this out and just go and do that. It was hands-on. So in other words, the way in which they were teaching their apprentices was fundamentally different to what was going on here. So I learned a lot from this, and the most useful learning I got from going and watching these colorists and their apprentices was a girl who wanted to prove to me how good she was. She was the equivalent of a concert pianist in coloring hair. She even showed me where she worked, where she opened up this cupboard, which had 400 different colors that she would use in different combinations, like watching a pipe organ in a big concert hall. She could choose all the different things and give you whatever you wanted. And she said, you know what makes me good? She says, I could do this from the local pharmacy with a bottle which cost £10. I said, that's what I want to hear about. Tell me how you do that. And she explained to me how she did it. And that was the brilliance of it. Okay. So that was what I got from going to talk in the salon. Now, the next thing I did was to talk to my friend who admitted to me that she colored her hair. And I said, let's have a cup of tea. And I was in her home. And I said, tell me where you color your hair. Do you do this in the living room? She said, no, I can't do this because it will make a mess. It's terrible. I feel so bad about myself when I'm doing it. I'm worried that the chemicals will get on my sofa and so on. So she says, what do? Well, I get a drink and some chocolate in. I get my sister around. We put some music on and we go in the bathroom. Why the bathroom? Well, because we don't want to make a mess and so on. So we're in the bathroom. We're listening to music and we're eating chocolate, maybe having a drink and so on. So I went, okay. How can I change that experience to make that interesting? I need expertise because I've seen that the experts use that expertise, and they have to use expertise on very simple products, not the full organ, like with 400 different shades and so on. And what I suggested was a CD. Now, the reason why I wanted it to be a CD is that you could put the music on. There's a revenue stream for the agency doing it because they're licensing the music. And instead of buying a £10 bottle, you spend a $12 bottle. You spend maybe another $5 or $6 or $7 on the CD, and on the CD, the person talks to you, plays you music, and they tell jokes and so on, and they give you tips about your hair. But because of your different hair type, we use the CD as a timing device to say, if your hair is quite dry, now you should apply the coloring, now you should do this, now you should do that. So it becomes a treatment session with an expert, which is tailored, which is not tailored, it's standardized, but we use it for different people. But it's also entertainment, it's also motivation, and we're also transforming the customer experience. And of course, the business case to the client is to say, at the moment, you are struggling to get your product in retailers for $12. But now we've increased your price to $18, and next time they do their hair, they have to buy a new CD. So each time, we've raised the price by a third. How about that?
Okay, then. This has I'm feeling a lot of your direct marketing expertise come into play here. Could you also give us the example you mentioned? You just mentioned right now before starting about some work that you've done with Microsoft in the same space.
Well, the Microsoft thing was an interesting example because you think that those guys had the budgets to do primary research, and of course they do a lot of research. But the project they asked me to do was to come up with a customer summary for each one of their main customer groups so that it could be used by any of their suppliers, and every supplier was using the same definition of the customer. But here was the problem. You can't do any primary research, but we'll give you all the research we have. Oh, there's one thing I forgot. We don't just want to know about the business activities of our customers. We want to know about all of their lives, what kind of car they drive, their clothes, their music, all this kind of stuff, okay? But there's no primary research for that because Microsoft hasn't collected any of that data. So what do? I have to go and talk to Microsoft staff, the ones who are customer facing, because they talk to the customers and they know about them. And so I used a questionnaire to ask questions which even the people who talk to customers didn't know, and then they made it up. And from their imagination, from their assumptions they were making about customers, we were able to develop a DNA of what each of their customers was like. And it got so detailed that we were able to say that the sales guys, and by the way, this came down not only to the way they were, we were able to understand what their learning style was. how they used phones, how they used emails, all of those sorts of things. So, for example, the sales guys, they used a lot of jewelry. They'd like to show you pictures of their wife and their kids and what good school they went to, their most recent car. They're very flashy. They're all about external, look at me. These guys never read white papers. There's no point in getting them to do any documentation. If you want to influence these guys, you call them while they're in the car, and they'll take your call on the phone. Say, come and have a coffee with me, or come and have a meal with me when we have our next reception, and then I'll brief you in person, because all of their learning is face-to-face. If I'm talking to developers, I don't need to get together with them. I put the stuff on forums. I put white papers out there, but they will learn more by talking to each other. So in other words, as I went through this, I developed a typology which was 360 degree, and it related to all the different aspects of people's lives. And it made me realize that each of their profiles was completely different, had completely different learning styles, different motivations, but we were able to condense this down to a 700-word summary for each customer group, and we never had to talk to customers to do it. And I still remain very proud of that, and I still use that questionnaire today, because what I'm doing is asking client companies to tell me stuff about their customers they don't even know, and when they don't, they make it up. And when they make it up, that's even interesting, because you're either right or you're wrong. And that's where we flush out the stuff which is wrong, and we get to the stuff which is right. That's more Barefoot Insight stuff.
Yeah. Where did this name come from, by the way, Barefoot Insights?
Okay, well, the thing which I got kind of excited about, and I have a course which I take out, and it's got all these imagery from barefoot doctors in China, because even today, 90% of doctors in rural China trained as barefoot doctors, and the basic training for a barefoot doctor was 12 months in a college once you've left school, and 12 months apprenticeship when you got out into the villages being trained by someone else. In other words, total 2 years experience. Now, we'll talk about the impact of this on the research industry in just a moment, but to me it's a very good analogy, because the argument is to say that market research is democratizing. In other words, the whole process of civilization is that things which only rich people could afford are now coming to be afforded by everyone. And by the way, it's the same for insight and market research. The problem is that market research professionals don't want to hear that, because they're still used to selling stuff to rich people. So therefore, the whole principle, the idea of the Barefoot Insighter is to say, just like the barefoot doctors, China could not afford to train doctors for every part of the population using the conventional Western medical training system. So they developed a barefoot doctor system. And what I'm basically saying is the examples and the techniques and the stories that I'm sharing with you are, to me, examples of barefoot insighting, which once you've understood it, it means that a lot more people can learn to do research and get insights themselves without using the expensive tools which are analogous to Western medicine. That's Western research.
All right. That makes sense. This doesn't really apply to your. I wanted to get the one final case study out of you about your work with loyalty mailing. This is an area that a lot of small businesses can really benefit from. I think, especially in an economy various economies where there's this concept being thrown around. I don't know if it's really prevalent in the UK, but various parts of the world, there's this concept being thrown around. I guess it's a buzzword called storytelling. The definition is the same as it has always been. It's never been the case. I'm sure the same in your experience. Whenever you sell advertising or sell any idea, you don't sell the informational sell. You'd go for the emotional sell.
Yes.
Now that same concept that has not evolved at all to a great extent is called storytelling. So it has come to the point where small businesses are now employing human-to-human interaction tactics for their marketing, as opposed to doing mass broadcasting and story yelling, as it's called by Sapien Nitro. So if you could just tell me a bit more about your work in the grocery/retail area and this loyalty mailing schemes that you've run that actually help out the viewers quite a bit.
Okay. I will try and make it relevant to a small organization, but the organization I'm talking about now was sending millions of these things out, so it's difficult to adapt. But I think the principle is still the same. I mean, if you were to take the example of if you're asking people to go and buy a cup of coffee from a local store 4 or 5 times a week, but if you change one small thing, they might buy 1 or 2 less a week. Or once they start buying it regularly, they get bored with it because it's the same each time, so they go somewhere else. But here's the problem. If we go and research them, they don't say, this is what I've done, because most of our consumption behavior is automated. It's ritualized, okay? It's just, we're on automatic pilot. So we don't know when we've changed our behavior. So the problem for this particular loyalty program was they had a 1% shift in the adoption of their vouchers. And if we put that on a survey, okay, I don't care how big that survey is, on a 1% level, no one notices the difference. Do you not like it? What, are you not happy about it? They wouldn't even notice that it had changed most of the time. So therefore, the reason why you use qualitative research, and this is something where I would suggest that you do need to get a professional or a specialist to come and help you, is you need someone that can help you find things that people haven't even noticed themselves. And so what I did was to take the old pack with the vouchers in it and to ask people to open it up and then to show me how what they would do with the pieces, and the things they would keep, they would put in front of them, and the stuff they would throw away, they would put behind them. And then I got the new pack, and I got them to process the pack and to have the bits they would keep. They'd already told me where they stored them in their houses and so on, and the things they would throw away to put behind them. And we discovered that compared with the old pack, there was a particular segment of people that were throwing away vouchers which were worth $10, $12, $20. And they suddenly realized they were making mistakes. And because they were doing this, their bodies were doing this as an automated process. Their minds weren't switched on. But of course, as soon as the mind switched on, said, hang on a second, I can't believe it. I just threw all this stuff away. We were able to see what the processing errors were and then to fix them in terms of the design of that mail pack. So that was how we fixed it. But my point is that we can use that kind of processing, that observation of people, that working with people that sometimes gets called co-creation, to find errors, to find issues that those people themselves are not aware of. And one of the big problems we have now with online research in particular, and the idea of saying, if you want to find anything out to do a survey, is you are entirely dependent on either analytics, clicks, or you're dependent on what people say they do. But there's a whole aspect of research where people don't even realize what they're doing, and their behavior doesn't reveal it. And working with them, you can fill those gaps, and that is really where qualitative research has its main benefit.
Brilliant. I just wanted to ask one of the more final questions around the area of digital marketing, which is taking our part of the world by storm quite a bit. It's the opportune mobile marketing for the most part is quite famous in Hong Kong, purely because pretty much everyone is working. There's this, I wouldn't say there's 100% employment rate, but anyone who is working, there is this concept of dual incomes in the family, and children are busy. Everyone has something or the other going on. So they've come to the point where they've said that there's very little chance that from home to the train, from the train to work, from work to lunch, that the person doesn't do this. So there's more time on that screen than there is on any other screen that might be up there. Yes. And it's actually become very hard for advertisers from the what's called OH, outdoor advertising, out-of-home advertisers, to pitch to brands that, we're charging this rate, and they get the justifications of why would you charge that rate. When even if you take a snapshot, like you mentioned earlier, like just getting out, Barefoot Insiders, getting out of that conventional area where you're doing the research and going into the ground. And if you just stand at any balcony, right outside my apartment, if I just stand outside the balcony and look down, you won't see anyone looking up at the sky, admiring the clouds, or even looking at any billboard or interacting with any QR code up on the billboard. They're all looking down at their phone. So I just wanted to get an idea of your sort of work in digital marketing, digital and social media marketing, current and previous work, and the sort of understanding that you've developed over the years of what social media is good for and what digital marketing is good for.
Okay. Whoa. How long have we got? Okay, just a couple of things to comment on, because I would want to focus on the problem solving, getting to the insight which gets us to be able to bring about change. I just want to make a couple of comments.
Sure.
Firstly, as human beings, we have there's two particular areas of activity which should be of interest to marketing people. The first is anything you do automatically, because anything you do automatically, you'll just keep on doing. It's your default solution for doing something. So therefore, the thing that we need to understand is what is routine addictive behavior which simply repeating. How do I create behavior which is repetitive, which makes me feel good when I do it? So if I'm on the train, I'm coming back, I always get that drink or whatever, because I've taught myself to reward myself through doing that. So we get a lot better about repeated behaviors. And the whole point about this is to say they're not paying attention to marketing messages or anything else because they're just doing their repeated behavior. They don't need to worry about it. So the idea is I'm still making money when they're not paying attention. As a marketer, you should be interested in that. The other one is to say, for people to form that addictive behavior, that routine behavior, we need to help people to engage. We need to teach them, to educate them, and so on. What's the best way of doing that? Now, routine or repeated behavior is so profitable when you do the math on it. It's worth your making a big investment in teaching people or giving them a positive experience on the other side. So it may be that you take people away and you say, if you give me 5 minutes of your life watching this movie, if I teach you how to do this and so on and so forth, you've made a connection also that if I can turn that into a repeated behavior, that's where the profit is. But I basically need to reward people for how to educate them. The problem is that a marketing person often simply says, I want to simply deluge you with messages, and the more messages I deluge you with, you will hear me, you will take on board the lesson, and you will develop a new repeated behavior. No, you won't. You need to do both extremes. You need to automate for that person, but you need first to educate, to give people a reason for doing something, to start that process. So that would be the first thing I would say. There's too many people just shouting at you in the middle, and we ignore those people. The second thing to say is we're not using mobile phones in the way in which we probably ought to be. The problem, the worst habits of surveys, which used to be done face-to-face, then they were done across the telephone, and now they're done across your mobile phone, is that they ask you to answer a bunch of questions, and of course you don't want to do that because you're on the train, you're tired, you've been out all day, you're on the bus, and so on. All they've done is to take bad research practice and to make it more personal, so it's right in your face on your mobile screen. So one of the best ways of doing mobile research is not to ask them any questions at all. It's to ask people to tell you who they're with, how they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're doing. Just, most mobile activity is in the background. It's not in the foreground. Just tell me that. And then do this 20 or 30 times. Every time you feel hungry, just do that, okay? And then a week, I'll call you, we'll talk about it. I'll put on the online platform all the things which you have got, which you've told me about your mood, and then we'll go back over your emotional state, who you're with, and so on, and we will look at your marketing behavior during that time, and we will fill it in. So that's a far more accurate way of understanding the states that people are in. Because the basic problem with sending someone a survey when they're in a buying or consuming situation is, as soon as they're answering the survey, they're not consuming or buying, they're doing research. And the problem with online research on mobiles is that most of the companies in this space are simply taking people out of their context into a research context, and that's bad practice. So, so I just wanted to say, with projects that I'm working on, one of the opportunities for mobile is to get people to in the moment to tell you what they're doing, what they're noticing, what they're experiencing, and you build on that. I'm not trying to get research data in terms of people answering surveys in the context, because in effect, they have now turned into trained puppets who are in research planets, and they're not giving me the insights. They give me the best of what they are when they are themselves. And so my job as a researcher, there's another website I have called Brand Safari, and I'm saying the role of a researcher is like a safari guide. In other words, they're there to make sure that the tourists have a good time with their cameras, that's the marketing people, but the animals, that's the customers, can enjoy themselves without feeling hassled by all these jeeps zooming around all the time. And to say, the more natural you are, the more you're feeding naturally, living naturally, and doing stuff, this is a good environment for both the tourists and for the animals. So part of our job is to be a great safari guide. And my big concern about mobile research is that it's basically bad practice. It's shoving a camera in the face of an animal and saying, shut up, and let me take your photo 150 times a day.
You bring up a point that one of our previous speakers, interviewees brought up. His name is Sasha Strauss. He's the managing director of Innovation Protocol. He brought up this brilliant point where he's basically against market research, traditional market research. Again, keeping in mind not in its essence, he's not against the idea of market research. He's against the ways market research is conducted. Yep. So he's against the idea of something as simple as you have focus groups where you have a bunch of women come in and they talk about a certain product, a certain buying behavior. So he's like, what you don't understand, what marketers don't seem to understand is even when they call themselves insights and consumer insights people who or professionals whose living depends on understanding people, first of all, and then secondly involves understanding the customer behavior, the marketing behavior, purchasing behavior of those people. And they don't even understand something as simple as if you put 6 women in a room, first of all, they're just strangers. They're all going to start judging and looking at each other and sizing each other up to a certain extent. Women do it in a different way, men do it in a different way. But then when you ask a bunch of women, if you ask a certain person in front of other people that they don't know, in front of strangers they don't know, about certain rational behavior that they may or may not have, it does actually affect their answers quite a bit. They will probably give you a rational answer to an irrational behavior.
Yes.
You'll ask them, why did you do this? They will not tell you why they did it because A, they're around strangers. B, they don't know you. C, they want to appear to be smarter people as compared to who they actually are. It might not be the case, but it usually is the case. Person will give you a much more rational answer. Even the research surveys that people get online, if it's too long, they will put in the false information. People will, it's not just about falsification, they will try to even look good if they believe that this information is being tracked. At least in this day and age where people believe that my information might be shared, they'll give false information. Sorry, you were saying something?
I will give you a very simple example of that. If I was
Right.
to say to you, so how do you think you, as a marketing professional, handle webinars compared with a developer? What's the difference between the way you do that? You're just going to go, I don't know, I never even thought about it. But you don't want to look stupid, so you're going to say something, okay? That is exactly the same as asking a customer to talk about their purchasing behavior. You know why? Because purchasing behavior away from marketers isn't interesting. It's boring. It's just the stuff that you have to do to buy stuff when you get hungry or because you need new clothes. So to ask people to introspect on something which is a marginal part of their lives is fundamentally stupid. Just as for us to asking us to introspect on marketing stuff, we will be stupid. But if I was to say, tell me the marketing people you have learned the most from, you'll talk for a long time about that, and you'll be talking not about yourself, but about other people from whom you've learned. So if we get these women into this focus group, and I think this is very specific to Asia, because there's the shame culture, and so therefore not wanting. I was brought up in Asia, by the way. I was born in Singapore, and I was brought up in Japan, but that's another story. But the point is that there's a shame culture. So once someone has said something, no one wants to contradict them, so we'll all agree, okay? So the way in which we deal with women like this is to say, so what would your mother say? Because she can talk about what her mother says, and if the next person says to her, well, my mother's different, she'll defend her own mother, but she won't defend herself. So as a researcher, there's ways we have around this, which is to say, this is a Western concept to have 8 people come in a room, in a laboratory or even a hotel room, and basically perform for each other and defend their corner. It's artificial. It came out of psychotherapy. This is ridiculous. How do you expect people to introspect about their own behavior? They can't. Therefore, you need to have much more subtle ways of questioning to get people to reveal the truths they know, but they never put into words before. That is the art of research. But my point is, I know all my market research fellow professionals will say to me, that's why you can only use us and you must never use anybody else. I'm going, no. Yes, in certain situations you need the professional. But people can be taught to ask questions, but not to believe everything they're told, and to ask questions in the right way, because what you're asking someone to do most of the time is ridiculous.
Yeah. And this even goes into basically the point that Sasha was basically raising, that if you're going to do any sort of research, you might as well do it in the context of the person's doing.
Yes.
And this additional point that you brought up, I'll definitely run it by him, where you sort of maybe find a way around it. Then again, like you're mentioning, in Asia, they're absolutely correct. There's the shame and fear, and a couple of other aspects. At least in our part of, I grew up majority of my life in Saudi Arabia, and second majority, I'm between Hong Kong, UAE, and Pakistan now. So over there, even in Pakistan, people will use religion as a very strong tool for marketing and in getting their point across. Various religions, it's not just a religion, various religions, but that'll be the aspect that they use as a no-brainer in the sense that the contradiction point that you brought up, I can relate to that almost immediately. So in Pakistan, for example, no one contradicts anything someone says in religion because they're ignorant about the religion in the first place. Yeah, they're ignorant about the religion, about their own religion in the first place. That you got the extremists and the terrorists and things like that. You got extremists in Pakistan. They're professionals and everything. They don't know about their own religion. But they don't want to. They don't want to admit that they don't know. So, for example, if I come up and I say, "Oh, the passage 415 dot dot 67 says this," they will not challenge me. They'll just assume that I'm saying it legitimately. And if I say it with enough confidence, they'll go like, "Yeah, exactly that," and I could be making it up on the spot. And actually, people do. Our politicians, our marketers, couple of stakeholder groups on the communication side, they use religion quite often to get their point across. Or even use religion as a basis for creating any sort of law, or any new rule, any new policy or basis. So I guess it varies. I'm not sure about how it works that well in secular societies. In Hong Kong, even religion and culture has a huge impact. What will your parents think is quite common in India and Pakistan. We have this, like how in UK you got this meme going around, keep calm and carry on.
Yes.
So we have this meme going around. It's in our language. So Indian and Pakistani language is more or less the same, and it's this. I'm saying it in our mother tongue. It's, yeah, in Urdu. So it says "Log kya kahenge," which basically translates to "What will people say?" And then the phrase is "Log kya kahenge" has killed more dreams than anything else. So that's like a tagline that you'll see on people's T-shirts, and they just wear it blatantly, and they'll point at it and be like, I want to get married on my own choice, and then it's like, but I can't because look at what the T-shirt says. What do
Sure.
people say? It's not traditional and all that. So it really does impact everything over
But
here.
that is exactly the point that I was trying to make about mobile and people's behavior. You have at one extreme rule-based behavior. In other words, you don't need to think, because as soon as someone says this is the rule, everyone says yes, and everyone does the automatic thing. But what we have to do for a lot of insight is to say, you don't know what the rules are. Can I get you to trust me, to tell me something before someone closes you down and says that's wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, and so on? A lot of what we have to do to create positive learning is to get people to say what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and that is a really subtle part of research, because the whole basis of the most important part of research is to get people to tell you something that was never ever put into words. That's where all truth begins. We turn truth into language, we then combine it with knowledge systems, and then it becomes culture. There's a whole arc that goes through there, and then once the culture is there for a while, culture becomes wrong, and we have to go and refine the truth again. So that's the whole truth. That's how insights, that's the life cycle of an insight and how they grow. But the beginning point is it's something which no one has ever noticed. And all new businesses have started with something where you didn't know that you didn't know. And the established companies with all the money, they didn't even see it coming. And some guy said, well, it could be like this. And everyone said, no, we all know that's not right. And he took something that they didn't know that they didn't know, and they built a whole new business with it. That's how it works. And that's why the kind of research that I do will go on being relevant, because ultimately most research is still asking people to parrot either what they know or what they think everyone else knows, and they just give you the rule. They're just repeating stuff, and it's not insightful at all.
Brilliant. John, I really enjoyed this talk. I really enjoy the case studies more than anything else. I would really encourage you to really, the blogs and all are great. I've read a couple, even on your website, and I would encourage everyone to log onto your website. Go on the Safari site, if you could repeat
Yes.
the URL for us.
That's just look for Brand Safari.
Right.
brandsafari.co.uk. You can
Right.
also, but you can find it from Brand Safari. There's another site called Waggle Dancers. Now that's a very
Right.
weird site. Waggle dancing is the dance that the honeybee does, and you know the best strategists in the world are honeybees, because when they find some nectar, they don't keep it to themselves and try and get a promotion. They do a dance so all the other bees know where it is. So that's my site for culture and culture change, which is to say, there's three things you do when you're a great waggle dancer, okay? That you're a honeybee. First of all, you find the good stuff. Two, you make everyone else want to go and get it for themselves. And the third is you're a great dancer, so they know where to find it. Otherwise, you create the motivation, you find the stuff, but they never find it. So that's the Waggle Dancers site. So I've got basically, if you follow my blog on Blogger, what I'm doing is every day, maybe I'll stop doing it eventually, but at the moment I've got enough to go on with. Every day I reference to something I've done in the past, and every day it's different from the day before, so you'll never get bored. I hope you can say that with the things you've seen, you didn't get bored with anything you saw, and if there's something you didn't understand, don't worry about it. But the idea of this is simply that when I have an idea or a project, I set it up, I put it on a new site, and that I realized that no one website could cover all of this content. And so therefore, I'm referencing lots of these different projects, or people do a webinar like this, or so I've got presentations on SlideShare. So the easiest way is for me to simply point to all the different places where my stuff is, and that's useful.
It came to my attention on Marketing Society's blogging section, and I really enjoyed the article on Barefoot Insights, mostly because, first of all, the image was very unique. The image chosen was extremely unique as opposed to what is usually on that page. Secondly, the concept Barefoot Insights. I'm a big fan of barefoot running, so I thought I wonder what Barefoot Insights is. And the final point was the examples given, and the perspective was quite unique. Like you're mentioning about how people have a misconception and they go with it, and then they'll add on to that misconception. They'll innovate within that misconception range. You'll hear a concept, and then you'll ask people, where did you get the idea that that could be correct? Just assuming that it is correct, and they'll be like, I heard this one thing, and that one thing that they heard is absolutely really off track, at least for the current the way the world works today. But yours was the sort where even I commented. I even commented to your article that I agree to a certain extent, but I was just trying to be honest about how I felt about the topic. But I really do feel that disagreement is one way to have a deep conversation with someone.
I agree.
On various topics. In this case, it was very useful for me. Really, the example that's going to stick to my mind is going to be the wine example, because I deal with more than anything else. I deal with food and retail brands, retail, fashion, and food. And that's my area of expertise and my background. So whenever I deal with clients from now on, I'll just be like, we've got to find a way to make the door handle smell like donuts. I don't know. We're gonna do something.
One day I'll have to tell you. I worked on an advertising campaign to sell Uncle Ben's rice to Saudi Arabia, and I had to do it without going to Saudi Arabia. So that's another story. I'll have to tell you.
Okay.
But
that's a story for a different session. We'll have another session in a couple of weeks.
The one thing I was also going to say to you was, if people are saying, how do I become a Barefoot Insider and what do I do? I am running courses in this, and I'm going to start blogging about it. I'm hoping that I will write a book about how to be a Barefoot Insider in a year, which breaks it down into simple processes. But the thing I would like to leave with people as a way of starting to think about this is, how do I get hold of a customer insight? And there are 4 ways to respond. Way number 1 is DIY. Go and find it out yourself. I don't have time to tell you how to do that, but DIY is, there are lots of tools which enable you to do this kind of thing yourself. Level 2 is taken from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and it's called Phone a Friend. In other words, ask someone who knows. Call a professional. You have to do it yourself, but find a professional who can at least do a call with you, do an hour of consulting with you, who can say, am I doing the right thing? Am I making some basic mistakes? Most people will help. And I think you should pay them for their work, but the idea is, get a friend who can advise you, who's an expert. Level 3 is hire a professional. Someone like me. So the idea is, get a researcher to do that job, because they understand, and it's going to cost you money, but they will do a good job. Level 4 is hire a specialist, because there are particular elements of culture or ethnography or anthropology where there's all sorts of insights, but you don't know these people all the time, so you need to be able to plug them in and out very, very quickly. So I just wanted to put that in to say there are 4 levels. I'm not here to hustle you to say you should always use me. Part of the thing is to give you the confidence to say, this is great, I learned so much, I went and did what you told me, and I did it all myself. Fantastic. There are other people who will say, I called John, and he gave me some advice, and then I could do it myself. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually the way of the future quite a bit. A lot of people I've spoken to are actually partners and alliance partners and former clients and current clients of our lead investor, Ephlux. So in their case, it's more or less the same, where they've said that we weren't necessarily their customers, but we were part of their pre-sales process, and they did actually help us learn something down the road. And when it impacted us, then we came back to them. Eventually, you do go back to the teacher. I'm sure you get a lot of business as being a teacher, or even a lot of queries as being a former teacher from your students, saying that I was able to perfect my area of expertise because of you. I'm sure you can give me more insight that's unbiased and unfiltered and to the point, and because the teacher-student relationship is the sort where you can be blunt with them, and you have that comfort level to tell them that no, this is wrong. Sorry, you are the client in this situation right now, but you are wrong about this. Let's try a different tactic of going about it. But thank you very much, John, for being with us. I just like if you could possibly end with a final note on what the CMO or the Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Digital or the Chief Marketing Officer of 2014 needs to understand about this era that they work in, and just pertaining to the UK market, if you could be more specific about it, what they need to know in terms of succeeding in this particular year as opposed to their competitors.
Okay. Again, I'll try and be as brief as I can. I suppose I would want to simply commend insight as something which never goes out of fashion and which builds whole businesses. And that insight is specific to the way individual people live, not even the way their consumer behavior, but the way ordinary people live. And therefore, if you don't have time to pay attention to it, and by the way, you should be, then you need to have people in your organization or to have friends, in that sense, business partners who can pay that depth of attention to customers. I'm increasingly interested in analytics because I think analytics is going to be the bedrock on which businesses are being built, whether large businesses or startups. The danger is that because we are now suspicious of people self-reporting themselves in surveys, that we now turn to analytics and we follow analytics blindly as if it gives us all the answers. So what I would commend to you is insight working in partnership with analytics, because you have to know what people are doing, but also what you need to know is what is motivating those people. And the most important question is, what might they start to do that they're not doing now? Because we're not here to simply repeat the past. We're here to create the future. And to create the future, you cannot do that just doing random guesses, random tests, and stuff like that, and simply monitoring past behavior. You have to imagine. And the great thing about us human beings is you and I have been talking is that we have been engaging with each other in conversation, but we've been exercising our imaginations on what if, what is possible. And the beauty of insight is it's a what if. It's actually a forward look as to what could happen, and therefore our job as marketing people is to go and make that happen. But to do that, we have to be close enough to understand it.
Brilliant. I love the conclusion, and I really enjoyed talking to you, John. And I'd encourage people to learn more about this. I'm really happy to find out that you're writing a book. That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you. Why don't you write a book about this? I mean, blogging is great and everything, but I actually do enjoy getting an idea of how can I apply something immediately. And I'm the sort of person, when I read a management book, I'm sure a lot of people do more or less the same thing. I don't read the entire book. I'll read a chapter and then I'll try to apply it. And I'll read a chapter, try to apply it, and just keep going back and forth. But it ends up even happening with quite a few people that I do know and who have a similar style of reading. They'll read a chapter, they'll try it out, then they'll email the author and say, I did this. Just so you know, I did this, and the author ends up using that in their next book, or they end up using that in their live blog and all. So that's actually much more interactive and much more. They can learn much more from that, and people are more than willing to write back to people who've clearly bought their book. So that's the sort of approach that I would generally apply with yours as well. I really do feel like the examples that you've given are really hands-on. Person who reads your book, reads your blog, they can immediately apply something. Even with your article, make it simpler. The journey of Barefoot Insider. As soon as I read it, I shared it with a lot of people, and I even asked them, like, what do you think? And I got a lot of negative and positive response from people. It varied, but it did bring up a conversation that wasn't there before, and people never really brought it up because they thought, if I bring it up, people might question my stance as a market leader or my stance as a marketing professional. So thank you for that. That actually did. They bring me quite a few queries and quite a few leads in terms of getting people to speak on the topic. I'm sure we'll bring up more people via Marketing Society and other groups where we talk about Barefoot Insider as a topic, and you could be pulled into it, and then you could add more information in terms of anything we've left out on. So just to conclude, thank you very much, John, for being with us. I'd like to re-establish a session with you in about a week or two, and just to continue on the other aspects that you left out on. As a continuous learner, I really like to learn more about digital marketing and social media marketing in terms of what I can do for the emerging markets and the developing economies. And I bet you're the professor for me that I could just learn that from. So thank you for your time. I'd like to continue this in about 2 weeks' time. We'll just have a talk off the record then.
Okay.
See you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.